Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by White House reporter Katherine Doyle. Katherine, you've done some reporting on the Biden administration's dealings to try to get Americans who we view as wrongfully detained out of the foreign countries where they're being detained. But most of these efforts, even when successful, have not come without some controversy. What are sort of the problems that the president has run into, and maybe some of the pressure that people have needed to apply to him to get some of these people home?
It's been helpful for Biden, I think, to have validators in the public who have come out and said that some of these more controversial deals, say involving an arms dealer who the U.S. Was holding,
Sure.
That would be a swap that the administration should do. There was, under previous administrations, the presidents were unwilling to, but as Victor Bout, someone who was released last week, was approaching the end of his sentence, people inside the administration and also outside prominent figures started to make the case that it would be an appropriate move to release him in exchange for someone else. In this case, it was for Brittany Griner, a basketball star who was arrested in Russia earlier this year, and not for some of the other hostages. Russia would only do a one-for-one exchange, but the families of people who continue to be locked up are hoping that they'll find an avenue to apply some pressure on the administration to get their family members home.
So we've heard a lot from these families. So, Brittany Griner's wife had been pretty outspoken, saying that maybe the administration wasn't doing enough. Obviously very happy with the outcome now. That was true of Trevor Reed's family. Obviously they're happy with the outcome now. Paul Whelan's family still waiting for Paul to come home. But it's definitely been the case that these things seem to be a controversy involving the families, even in cases where eventually Biden is able to bring the person home.
It's helpful, certainly, to apply that kind of pressure on the administration with somebody like Brittany Griner. It wasn't just her family, but there were a lot of people in the public and a lot of journalists who were asking about this frequently. She was a celebrity, and so it applied an enormous amount of pressure on Biden to try and find some sort of resolution. With Paul Whelan's family, it's been a little bit more of a challenge. The administration has praised them for how they've acted. They're very polite in the words of people who know them, but that hasn't quite yielded the results that they may be hoping for after several years.
Yeah, Paul Whelan is being held on an espionage charge, which he denies. Brittany Griner was a drug charge, so there is some thought that maybe that's complicating getting him out. But obviously the families have to get a little concerned anytime anybody's traded, because that's somebody who won't be available for a trade for somebody who's still in captivity.
Yeah, that's right. The administration says that with Paul Whelan, because of the nature of his charges, that Russia is seeking something a little bit different than they were for Griner. But our reporting shows that there were possible options for Whelan to come out earlier on. It just seems that as time has gone on, as the end of Bout's sentence approached, he was worth less to in a swap, or at least that's how the Russians argued it.
Now, you've done some reporting where the previous administration, the Trump administration, there is some talk that there was negotiations around Victor Bout, and the former president did not want to deal him.
Inside the prior administration, there was a split between people who were extremely reluctant to acknowledge any sort of willingness to trade hostages as something that they thought would weaken maximum pressure campaigns on foreign governments. The government has continued and did then also trade hostages. It's just that their posture around Victor Bout was much stronger than it might have been with some others. And so there's Trump over the weekend said that he'd turned down a deal for Whelan. There's some dispute over over what that deal looked like.
Sure.
It's not entirely clear that there was a a deal that had been put on the table, or whether it was a preemptive sort of rejection
So
of
the details of
prospect.
it are kind of hazy, but there has been some discussion that at least there were talks potentially about doing something like this, and they decided against it.
Yeah, exactly. I think they thought that they were going to get Paul Whelan home in a different way, but after losing the election, that went off the table.
Now, speaking of losing the election, former President Donald Trump is trying to become the next president. What is the status of the Trump 24 campaign right now? I mean, he's already announced. What's sort of going on with his bid to be the next Grover Cleveland and serve non-consecutive terms?
Well, he's a declared candidate, but we haven't seen much movement from the campaign. The structure of it is still largely unclear. We have reported a while ago that several aides close to him are expected to effectively be managing it and leading some of the operations, but there hasn't been much public information released, and he hasn't really announced any plans to go on the campaign trail. He's made a few virtual appearances and has been hyping attention in other ways, but really there's been very little action that you might expect from a new candidate hoping to clear the field in anticipation of winning the nomination.
Now, he did have one major announcement, his digital trading cards, where he appears as a superhero, a cowboy, I believe. I'm not sure, perhaps he's running for president of the Village People. What is the reaction a lot of people have? I mean, that is certainly not a standard campaign move, right? Unless I've missed it.
No, it's not. I think he's trying to capture the Christmas gift market in time for the holidays, and perhaps we'll see a more formal fundraising mechanism or project after that.
After he's won the war on Christmas.
That's right.
Thank you, Katherine. You can read Katherine and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.